Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today, giving us your time and, of course, your perspective, because as we are going through this list, President-elect Trump deciding on hedge fund manager Scott Bessent for Treasury Secretary. And if confirmed by the Senate, he will play a pivotal role in the debate to extend the 2017 Trump tax cuts. So as we take a look at that and digest that, what sort of challenges do Republicans really face trying to make that happen?
Well, thank you. First of all, Laura, thank you for having me on NewsNation this morning. I'm very excited to see the president and the pace at which he is filling out his cabinet, designating appointments for these important posts. And there is certainly a lot of work ahead, but I think getting these names out early and giving the members of the Senate who have the task of confirming them the opportunity to think about that well in advance of the president being sworn in is the right step and the right move. We do have a lot of work to do, and you mentioned the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2017 and those elements of it which will be expiring in the time period ahead. It is critical that we renew those to maintain the robustness of the U.S. economy and continue to encourage investment and entrepreneurship in our country. And so I feel confident that a unified Republican Congress will get that job done, and the president certainly will lead the way in helping to make sure we get that part of this agenda pushed through in the coming Congress.
Congressman, I asked Mick Mulvaney last hour if he had any surprises, as we are going through these names popping up on our phones with every new alert, every new pick. Some people are like, whoa, with some of these names. Is there anybody that has surprised you? I'm curious what you think. And are you surprised at the speed this is happening?
Well, no, I'm not surprised because I think the president's had plenty of experience, plenty of time to think about this. And I think anyone who looked at these nominees would be lying if they didn't say, oh, I didn't see that coming. But I think the president has, a design to what he's doing. I think he wants to disrupt the status quo in Washington. And I think these appointments that we've seen come out are quality people with talents and skills and experience. They're going to bring a different perspective. And it's the kind of perspective that I think the American people were calling for when they gave President Trump the mandate they did in the election 2 weeks ago.
Right. Well, let me just say this. I don't think a lot of people saw Pete Hegseth coming. That was a surprise. I mean, I was here in the newsroom when that happened, and it was a wow, and people were, making phone calls and saying, is he qualified? I mean, that wasn't a surprise to you at all?
Well, and I must say, Pete is a constituent of mine here in the 6th District in Tennessee, so very proud of Pete and seeing him gain this nomination or this selection or appointment as Defense Secretary. So we're excited about that. Again, I think you have to look at these appointments and understand that President Trump is, and the American people in electing him have expressed that they're unhappy with the kind of the status quo in Washington, that inside the Beltway mentality, and very upset about what's been happening at the Department of Defense, where we've seen DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives take a front seat, and we've seen the mission of the Defense Department to defend this nation take a back seat. And so I think Pete Hegseth is the right man to get that done. He certainly has combat experience and military experience, and he has been involved actively over recent years in watching what's been happening at the Pentagon. So I think he's the right person at the right time.
All right. Well, we'll see how that shakes out. Trump is vowing to go after foreign competition with higher tariffs. But the question here is, will American families actually end up paying more for goods? Because Trump's tariffs could cause an average family's grocery budget to grow by $200 or more than 3% in 2025. That is according to the Tank Third Way. So as we take a look at those numbers, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think if you look back at the last 4 years, 20+% inflation across the board. And while inflation has slowed somewhat in recent months, that doesn't get back that $1,000 a month that the typical family of four has to spend, more than they did when President Biden came into office. So we've seen what Biden's approach to this gets us, and I'm willing to take a bet that what President Trump is going to do is going to take us in the right direction. Sometimes you have to break some eggs to make an omelet, and I think you see the president willing to do that, willing to send a strong message to the rest of the world that America needs to be treated fairly. Our workers need to be on a level playing field with the rest of the world, and that hasn't been true under President Biden. So I think the aggressive policies that you see the Trump transition team putting forward in terms of the message they're sending with these appointments is just the right message at the right time, that we intend to deal with our adversaries around the world and our trading partners who may be mistreating us more aggressively than the Biden administration has.
Yeah, we talked to a lot of voters going into the election. The economy was the #1 issue for so many people. Your Fed Chair Jerome Powell says he will not step aside, even if Trump asks him to. So Bissett has suggested that Trump could name a replacement chair early. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the jury is a bit still out there. The Fed chairman, I think, was complicit in the policies that led to the runaway inflation. He was late to the game in terms of that. And I think now he turned policy around a little bit too early. And so, his track record is a little bit sullied at this point. And I can understand why the president might be looking for someone new to lead at Treasury or at the Federal Reserve.
Right. And, Matt Gaetz, of course, making headlines all week, resigned, stepping aside as Attorney General nominee after resigning from Congress. Let's listen to some of his interview with Turning Point USA's Charlie Kirk, and I'll ask you about it on the other side.
I'm still going to be in the fight, but it's going to be from a new perch. I do not intend to join the 119th Congress. There are a number of fantastic Floridians who've stepped up to run for my seat, people who have inspired with their heroism, with their public service. And I'm actually excited to see Northwest Florida go to new heights and have great representation.
So what do you think? Should the American people be able to see what's in the House Ethics Report on Gaetz? Is that fair?
Well, I think that's up to the House Ethics Committee, and it's my understanding so far they have not reached a consensus on that would cause that report to be released. We have to remember that the FBI investigated former Congressman Gaetz and decided not to pursue prosecution. I'm not a part of the ethics investigation, but we have a process for that. It's a bipartisan process, which is as it should be. And so I think we let that process run its course. And if the committee thinks that the report shouldn't come out, then I think that's the answer.
Well, don't you think the American people deserve to see it? They voted him in.
Well, again, a lot of things happen in these investigations that are, not intended necessarily to become public. And the Ethics Committee is empowered to seek out information that otherwise would not be in the public domain. So that process, if we're going to do that with Matt Gaetz, then we should release every ethics investigation over all time so the American people can see those. And I don't think that would be fair to members of Congress who participate and voluntarily cooperate in those investigations. So my sense is that it's not clear that that information should be in the public domain. The thing to remember is that the FBI investigated Representative Gaetz, and they found that there was no reason, or they chose not to proceed forward with the prosecution. But I'll leave that to the Ethics Committee to decide, and if they conclude that that information should become public, then that would be the process at work.
All right, and we'll see how that works out too. And Trump is calling for recess appointments to get his nominees confirmed, which would skip the confirmation hearings. Is that fair?
Well, that's part of our Constitution, and I think in the appropriate circumstances, sometimes if the Senate is failing to get its job done, then I think the Founding Fathers recognized there might be appropriate circumstances for that sort of thing to happen. So I would say it is appropriate for the president to be able to put his picks, his choices in office. He is the man that the American people elected to be president of the United States, and they did so overwhelmingly. And I don't think we want the Senate to be deterring his ability to get the job done that the American people sent him to Washington to do.
All right, Tennessee Republican Congressman John Rose, we want to thank you so much for your time. I like the analogy of cracking eggs to make an omelet. Thanks for that today.
Thank you.